Good evening, everyone. It's Tom Sydney Bushnell, aka Numbers, here from Psych.Club from the Tom Numbers Show. News with Tom Numbers and top of your game. And I've got JUAN O SAVIN, top of his game, and doing the 007 impersonation, or maybe
Well, I
007
don't know about
impersonation
that,
of him. With the Aston Martin showroom. There you go. Wow.
yeah. Well, I took a test drive. They're bringing one over for me to look at later today. It's going to be kind of fun. They don't have new stuff. They've got some pre-owned ones, but they have one that is a left-hand drive that's available. And the issue is that this part of the world, you guys have influenced everybody to be right-hand drive. And they don't really work that well. It's hard for the passengers when you're sitting in a car and the drives on the opposite side of the road. So anyway, they've got one that I'm interested in, and I think it'll look a little convertible.
So they're going to
It's gonna
send
be a
that
lot
over.
of fun.
They're going to send it over there back to America for you.
Well, we're gonna take a look at it. I mean, it's here. Somebody transported it over here, and it just doesn't. It's just not the right car for this area. But might go back home and be a nice one in the States. It was there in the first place, so we'll see.
Can you say where you are right now in the world?
Yeah, I'm actually at the Garden Necklace Park here at Yokohama in Japan. So it's an
Big in
amazing
Japan.
place, actually. Say again?
Big in Japan, Alphaville. They're one of my
Yeah.
favorite 80s groups. Yeah.
Yeah. So this time of morning here is just fantastic. And get a sunset or sunrise that comes up beautifully. It's unfortunately a little cloudy this morning, but a beautiful spot when you get things just right. We had a couple of great sunrises over the last couple of weeks, and very fun.
Is that the sea in front? Is that a ship that we see ahead?
Yeah, that's actually one that was used. A lot of people went all over the world on that ship, and it's kind of displayed here now, and a much older model. I don't remember what year that was built. I think it was pre-war. So beautiful spot.
We've had some ships in the sea today here on the coast. There's two out there tonight, quite big ones, and they keep rotating around. There were a few helicopters. I don't know if that's maneuvers out on the English Channel 131, John F. Kennedy. I don't know, but yeah, we get them quite regularly. But today look kind of quite unusual because they're big ones and they're just kind of circling around. So don't know what that's about. Talking of cars, so we had the conversation a few months ago about the XKR, the Jaguar.
Jaguar.
What's your thinking on TVRs? Are you a fan? Do you know much about them?
Mm-hmm. A little bit smaller than I, personally enjoy. They work in a lot of places in the world where, big cars don't work. One of the things I've noticed here, quite a few people are driving American sports cars, but they're all small. They're not the big stuff. And they work in traffic here. The TVR is a little bit smaller of a car. And, for American roads, big, wide open, I don't think it really quite works right. The beauty of that XKR is you can go just about anywhere in the world, and it can handle a pothole. It can handle a rough road. It's got plenty of great safety features in it, and it's just overall, it's the right size. It's the right weight. It's got lots of power. It's actually a reasonably priced car in the used car market. And, in fact, I've told friends numerous times, that they want something really cool and stylish, and it works well. And I've had tremendous experience with my XKRs. I just rave about them. The ones, from 2001 to about 2006, while Ford was involved with Jaguar, they put out just an astounding vehicle. The body lines and the fit and everything are just over the top.
Over the top. That should be a movie. Yeah. I've joked with Mark Atwood before. I said, you, me, and him should do like a Top Gear alternative show. You could be the Clarkson. I'll be James Mason because Mark's so small. He could be Richard Hammond. Anyway,
Well, we could do it with just my own cars. That's one thing about British cars. You love to complain about them, but we Americans like to put American powertrains in them, and then they work so much better. The Shelby, of course, started with the British cars and putting American engines in them, and something like these newer cars, the complexity of putting a American engine in it is just wouldn't be worth it. But like I've got a little MG that
you've got an MG.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's got a V6 Chevrolet in it. It's oh gosh, I can't remember. It's about 380 horsepower. It's way overpowered. It's got all sorts of bracing and all that, but it's a beautiful little car. And it's the Robin's Egg blue, original paint. To the outside, it just looks pretty much normal, except for extra wide wheels and tires and four-wheel disc brakes and all sorts of had to change the rear end in it and all sorts of things like that. But it looks pretty normal until you step on the gas, and it'll leave tire marks for about a mile. If you keep your foot in the gas, won't go anywhere, but it'll leave a lot of marks on the ground. If you work the throttle right, though, it's a scary car. It's just amazingly fast. So,
is it an MGF, an MGTF? What is it?
Gosh, I don't even really pay that close of attention. I bought it with everything already in it. It's a 1972, I believe.
Oh, that's an old.
It's okay. Yeah. And I'm just trying to remember. It's the gosh, I'd have to look at it, reconsider. But it's just a cool car. I saw it, I liked it. The price was reasonable. We came up with an agreement, and father-son team had put it together, and then for whatever reason decided that they didn't want to keep it anymore. They'd had it for quite a while, and had been sitting in the garage for quite a while, and I think it still has all the dust on it. I didn't want to wash the dust off, but it's got beautiful paint on it. And the fun of it was just that they took this thing and made it, look absolutely stock, and from the outside, and did all this drivetrain stuff. The only thing I think it needs is it's got an excellent interior, excellent top, needs new carpet in it.
Okay, new carpet. You have to send me a photo of it if you've got one, or when you see it.
That, I just haven't. Oh, yeah, yes, I can drag one. I haven't even looked at it myself here for quite a while because I've been so busy. I have gone and looked there in the storage a couple of times at things, and saw it, I think, probably about 8 or 9 months ago, and was thinking, it's lonely. It needs attention. Once you get started up, go for a drive.
Yeah, I'll be curious to have a look at it because I've got my one, but I think it's coming to the end of its life, really. Or someone that's far more known about cars than I do that can resurrect it.
What's wrong with it?
Oh, well, I've only had it.
Wait a second. Hold on. It's a British car. What's not wrong with it?
Well, I think I have not really. I've learnt more about cars in the last 9 months than I knew really before, or at least remembered. No, I've learnt new things about cars, and I think it's primarily a head gasket issue. Three times pipes have blown on it, which is quite unique. I've never had that in a car where I'm driving along and then boom. It's happened to me twice, and it happened twice to the person that sold it to me prior to arranging the sale. But because I was committed to it, I was like, okay, I'll go with it. In hindsight, I should have just said no. But
No, what blew on it? What you said, kaboom? What blew?
pipe. So
Oh,
the radiator. I think it's the radiator pipe.
oh yeah. You've almost certainly got a blown head gasket, and you're getting pressure into the
Yeah, I think that's what it
coolant
is.
system. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, that's not that big of a deal. Gosh, as long as you haven't warped the head, and even then, it's an MG. It's not a ridiculous thing. Look, uh, next time I'm over there, I'll stop by. Let's take a look at it. We'll probably diagnose it in 5 minutes.
okay. All right, cool.
So
You're on.
we'll pull it out. We'll figure out who's the best guys to take it to and get it taken care of. But gosh, that's the other thing. Uh, Actually, guys that work on British cars, uh, most of them are actually very excellent. I've had nothing but experiences with the guys that actually work on them and know them. Like so many things, they've got their own idiosyncrasies, and
Yeah,
so you gotta, kind of, I'm not going to an Italian to fix a British car. I'm not going to a Brit to fix an Italian car. That's they're just different enough, and the logic that goes into them is just different enough that guys that work on something all the time. So like I'm a Ford guy, and I have Chevrolets, but I'm not, and they're easy to work on, all sorts of things. Chevrolet guys don't like to work on Fords, and Ford guys don't like to work on Chevrolets. It's a general rule, and it's just the way it is. So, I find guys
yeah.
that love that particular kind of car to work on those cars.
It's a good point. I hadn't even thought about that. But yeah, I've got a good mechanic that's looked at it before, but he's thorough. But it's kind of becoming a bit of a money pit, and I've not had much time on the road on it. So, but yeah, have a look at it when you're here next and see what you think. But when it goes, it's a lot of fun. But I'm thinking maybe a TVR might be. I'd love to get a Lotus, but I'm a little nervous that I could be just chucking if I get a bad one and I'm not trained enough to look at, figure out if it's a bad one or not.
Nothing can be simpler than an MG.
Say
And
that again?
you start getting into some of the other ones, and you might actually be getting into something that might have a little bit more of an issue. But my personal opinion is if the top doesn't go down, I don't want it. I've passed on lots of cars that were great cars, but if it's a little more classic, I want to be able to put the top down during a sunny day and like that. So
That's what
yeah,
I'd love. Yeah, all my cars now are always with the top down. Yeah, I
yep,
think
yep.
many things in
It
life
can
would
be
be with the
raining
top
out. I
down.
can still,
Yeah,
that's a nice thing. It can be raining out. I put the top down, and if
yeah.
you're starting to feel raindrops on you, you're probably driving too slow.
There you
So
go. That's it. Well, I had years ago. I had a Ford Escort Ghia, two of them actually, one after the other, and now they're collector's items. I should have kept them. I didn't know in hindsight. They go for a small fortune now. But I used to drive around in the snow. So if it was dry, as long as it wasn't raining, and like you say, even if you're going, if you're going quick enough, then you don't feel the rain. But I'd have the roof down with this when it was snowing. I remember quite clearly doing that. So
well,
yeah,
people think we're kidding, but actually,
no,
I've
we're
I've
not.
had so many times when I've been out, even in the snow. I can tell you some fun times. I would carry a ski rack on one of my '65 convertibles, and it'd be a sunny day. I'd be out driving, the little snow would come down on the way going skiing or coming back, and that's why God invented heaters. So I always love to have that top down from time to time. It's just I
If
feel
you
like
can,
I'll have the wind in my hair.
yeah, exactly. Did you say 65 convertibles? Were you talking about the year or the number of convertibles you've got?
Oh no! I my I've had several '65 '66 Mustangs over the years. And
Okay, yeah.
They're actually probably, you know, my amongst my favorites. In fact, I'd love to reach out to them. I had one of the guys that went on the lap around America back in 1989, the 25th anniversary of the Mustang, and we had I think a total about 60 or 70 cars. We brought them in from all over the world, Australia, um, and England, a couple from Europe. They put them on boats and shipped them over. And John there in England had a right-hand drive, original delivery right-hand drive. I think it was a '66 Mustang and red. And we hit it off pretty well. I had my, on that trip, I had my '66 Shelby, Hertz Rent-A-Racer. And I only got to do a couple of sections of the lap around America, but it was fantastic and a lot of fun and see all the cars. And, in fact, I'd love to. The one exception I'd make if I found any of the right-hand drive early Mustangs. I'm not as much a fan on the '67 and '8, although they're great cars. I do like the '70, '71s. But a right-hand drive, that'd be kind of fun just for greens because it's just so unusual and simple enough for the conversion. The guys that have done it, but just a cool car.
Who's John in England?
John had the right-hand drive '66 Mustang. Of course, it's been a lot of years ago. Like me, be an old man now. So who knows if he's parted with the car? And somebody over there probably knows that there's not that many of them there. I'll bet you in the whole country, you might only have 50 of them left that are actually right-hand drive cars originally.
What was the main one? John who?
Oh, I can't remember his last name now. I've got it in some of my stuff. We had a lot of fun during the drive.
Okay, so he was a friend, a car enthusiast that you know from England.
Yeah. And somebody in the audience will probably know John with the right-hand drive '66 Mustang. And in the whole country of England, there's not going to be very many. There's not going to be very many red '65 or '66 Mustangs in England, let alone a red one. So,
okay, cool, yeah, brilliant. Well, yeah, we have to do that show. We'll have to do the one Tom and Atwood show. Yeah. What brings you to Japan? Big in Japan?
Well, I've got stuff here in Japan that I was going to have done some meetings on. In fact, my book is coming out in Japanese shortly.
Or Kid by the Side of the Road?
No, Kid by the Side of the Road. It's actually all ready to go. We've had it over at the printers for a couple of weeks. And so that should be out here shortly. And we're not going to print a very large run, but it will be something unusual. And, I have a lot of history here that's, it's important. And we used the Japanese yen and the economy as our leverage position for taking down the ruble, along with the German mark, and then related currencies and currency locations for other aspects of it for the broader program down to Brazil. The largest Japanese population in the world outside of Japan is Brazil, of all places. And so the BOLA, because the banking is tied together. And here we are at this critical moment where we're back where we thought we would never have to be again, hopefully, some kind of a global conflict involving Russia. And a lot of the things that we did, thinking that we had saved the world from nuclear war, we always knew that it, was somewhere out there lurking. And here we are again, back where we were, 40 years ago, on the precipice of some type of global catastrophe in a conflict across the world, with roots back into this Cold War Russia, USA, China paradigm. And it's just painful to see that all the work that was done, all the effort, all the genius put into it, including, by the way, with the Russian people, to avert this monster. And here we are back there, right on the verge of who knows what kind of a calamity lies ahead. And very frustrating.
Yeah. Yeah, Japan.
I mean, you guys are closer to it. Putin's been saying it. He said it again here the other day. He didn't point at the U.S. He pointed at England. And because behind the scenes, you've got some politicians and some business people and some banking people that just are fixated on some type of conflict with Russia. And so Putin pointed at the world map, pointed at England, said it's a very small island. It would only take one bomb to wipe you off the face of the earth. And because they keep getting prodded and prodded and prodded. And so they don't see this as coming from all the other places. They see it as coming from right there. And then just I think 2 days ago, they blew up the castle that was used in the Harry Potter movies there in the Ukraine area. So there's an issue there that's not going away, and it's a very very serious situation. How it's going to get resolved, I don't know at this point in time. It's getting scarier by the day.
Didn't realize that the Harry Potter castle. Didn't know about that.
Well, and by the way, Putin's been very clear, even though Seymour Hersh, the writer, came out, did this huge expose how it was the United States that destroyed the gas pipeline, Nord Stream pipeline, with these explosions a couple of years ago, which then made it impossible for Russia to send their oil gas. They still have one left, and blew up 3 of them. Their oil gas into Europe to sell into the European market, which was one of the things that was negotiated at the end of the Cold War, so they could have essentially a way to get revenue, not doing it with arms because they were a big arms dealer to the world, but doing it with other resources. And so while Hersh wrote this article how it was American operation to take out the Nord Stream pipeline, Putin's never wavered that it was England. And there may have been U.S. assistance, but it was England that cut off those, destroyed those pipelines. And so this whole NATO effort, they've identified as being, really led by England in trying to make this pushback against the Russians, the Ukraine, and the World Economic Forum, and Davos crowd, and all that in this crazy conflict. It's very, look, everybody's got different opinions, and it's all obscured by, so and so says this, so and so says that. But I think Putin's got pretty good sources, and he's not backing off. So, we here in America, of course, have been funding it primarily with the Ukraine war. But the people that are in the crosshairs once again, just like World Wars I and II. You know, America had to come in to assist. France was under attack. England was under attack. And here we are again with a situation where, starting further east with the Russians this time, you know, we're back in a, you know, what's been considered only a Cold War resurgence, but could go hot at any time. You know, if they start with one tactical nuke, which all sides have said they can do, including the U.S., with stuff that came out of Strategic Command a couple of years ago, at any moment, this could change radically. And next thing you know, you've got nukes in use and the whole world in some kind of a peril that could be, instead of just losing, you know, Ukraine, you've got 600,000 Ukrainians dead is the reported numbers by some quarters. And, you know, 1 to 1.5 million injured. That's horrid numbers. I mean, you could blow a nuke up and not lose that many people, honestly, with a tactical nuke. So, does it matter if you got killed by a bullet or a nuke? People are dead. No. So, and there's no end in sight. The U.S. just sent another $92 billion, I think it was, to continue funding Ukraine in the war. You know, and they're, you know, being pressured to keep upping the ante. We're in it, you know, arguably 300 billion right now, and no end in sight. So, and from a U.S. side, to talk against continuing the war and doing more in the political arena, well, that's crazy. Of course, we're going to fund it more because we can't let Russia get away with this. Putin get away with this lawless action. But within the American people, you know, it's like 80% are you know, just pulling their hair out, pissed off. What are you doing this for? Why? Why is this being done? And it really doesn't make any sense, and it serves no purpose. Trump, in the campaigning coming up to the 2024 election, has said several times that if he was president, first of all, this wouldn't have happened. We'd have found ways to put an end to it or head it off long before it reached this point. But even now, he'd have this stopped in 24 hours. And, you know, at what point, you know, Russia's lost, you know, unbelievable numbers of soldiers, those Russian mothers and wives and sisters, families, fathers are just livid about all the deaths on the Russian side. They didn't want this. They got pushed to it. It's very disturbing.
Yes. What do you see in the trial right now with President Trump? How do you see that rumbling on?
Well, I think at the end, Trump will win, but there's a lot of bends and twists in the road, and the courts have been pretty one-sided in most of what's being done. There's Southern District of New York is a location where the prosecution, the courts are very politically one-sided. The jury pool is, you know, largely anti-Trump, and so I remember years ago. Actually, you know, it continues even now. But I had people in the intelligence community telling me to wave off from helping or assisting Trump because Southern District in New York had him cold on all sorts of crimes, and it was going to be very embarrassing, and they've got it. Well, it turns out that a lot of the people involved in the prosecutions of Trump themselves are guilty of crimes, it appears, and that they may very well, before this is all over, have been exposed for things that they've done that are lawless. So I don't think it's quite over yet. There's, in the political arena, it's, tit for tat. One side does one thing and the other side amps up and does something else. And it's going to take a while to play out. And we'll just have to observe it. At the end of the day, I believe Trump is within the legal world. He's kind of like my chief of staff, who was an A6 pilot, Prowlers. He was the first one to go feet dry into Iraq in the first Gulf War. And the whole point of that aircraft is you go into an area where the enemy has radar stations, and you get them to turn them on. And when they turn on their radar stations, they expose themselves. Some of them are mobile. And so then that helps you to know where their missile batteries are. And then when they turn themselves on, it's like putting a red light dot on the map, here I am. And they get ready to shoot the A6 down, the Prowler down. Then what happens after that is you get a F-18 or similar comes in behind it and just blasts the hell out of that target. Well, in the meantime, from the time that they turn on that radar until that incoming missile hits the target, that Prowler's in great danger. Somebody's trying to shoot it down. And Trump's like that. He's gone in. He's causing them to expose who they are, where they are, and we can now see them. We're seeing all of these people in the political arena, in the legal arena, show their true colors, their alliances, and now we can come in and begin to decide we're not going to go along with this or that or something else. The public sees who they are. There's all sorts of media attention gets on them. I think Trump is actually, the target here, but he's exposing all the people along the way for the people. So anyway.
Yeah. Like I think he said, or he alluded to it. Once that, they want to try him, then the process of discovery has to take place, so they'll get exposed in that.
Well, of course, that's what happened. Even like with Lindell and Pat Byrne. Lindell got sued on. He said, sue me, sue me, sue me. So they sued him on the Dominion vote machines. Well, then that gave Lindell the opportunity to get discovery inside to Dominion's operations. And in the discovery, they got the internal communications, texts and emails of Dominion employees and executives. And in the course of exposing that, we now know that Dominion was coordinating a lot of their election activity out of Serbia with Serbian nationals. To manage even on election day. And the day after, when all of the mischief occurred within the vote system here in the U.S. in 2020, that people out of Serbia were handling the electronics and the programming and servers inside of U.S. election systems, where they weren't supposed to be accessible across an air gap. That all sorts of things that Dominion said never happened. And turns out that by their own admission, a lot of stuff was happening that, was, apparently illegal. And then So did Mike Lindell do the same thing as Trump did and let himself be a a white rabbit? You know, let him start attacking him, put a target on his back, and exposing themselves for other people to come in and take him out after the fact. Could very well be.
Yeah, a white rabbit. Follow the White Rabbit, 233, John Fitzgerald Kennedy. Neo, 34, DJT, Leap, Grace. There's the boat. What's the name of that boat, Juan?
The Hikawa something or other. I can't remember off the top of my head here. It's kind of a famous boat. It's got a history. I'd have to. I don't read Japanese, but Jen could probably tell you. She's actually pretty good, and but it's just a fun sight for me. But I don't actually know the history on this particular boat.
But Jen can read and speak Japanese.
Yeah. Well, her family's Japanese, been in the country since the 1800s, but
So her family's
about
part
as American as it gets. Yeah, we had Japan and the U.S. We had lots and lots of Asians that came to America in the 1800s. Built the railroads, and San Francisco has one of the largest Chinatowns in the world. They wrestle with New York over whose Chinatown is larger, the New York Chinatown or the San Francisco Chinatown. And but you have lots of people out of Asia. Of course, China and Japan have been at each other's throats on several occasions. But it's kind of a mixed community. And in fact, here in Yokohama, the largest Chinatown in Japan. So you've got everybody blended together here, and the lines kind of disappear at some level. So,
Where was Chinatown based? Was that in the film with Jack Nicholson? Was that in China? Was that in
that movie?
Francisco or New York? Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, that's it's pretty risque subject matter. It is one of my favorite movies, just because the film style used, the tone of the film, the photography and editing and everything. The acting was all just really pretty amazing, pretty stunning, but pretty risque subject matter, and it does go back into the politics, that really reflects so much of what's going on in the world right now. So much of what is portrayed as being done for the good of the community and, city building and stuff like that. When you get to the meat of what's actually occurred, it's, wealthy people who are really criminals controlling the direction of the world. In this case, it's really almost just a microcosm. Southern California, moving the community to where the water's at and taking the water away from the orange grove farmers, and turning it over to the developers as the city continues to grow, and portrayal by the wealthy people involved that this is for the good of everybody, but of course they're going to make a buck along the way. And the people involved in the film, some of them fairly nefarious in their backgrounds, skilled, but nefarious. So much of what is out in the world right now, we have people playing for control of future of this planet, and they all come across as though this is really just a beautiful thing for the country. And yet you start looking into it deeper, and um, you know, it's for personal gain. They're willing to sacrifice everybody else on the planet for their goals, and uh, it's really not under the surface what is portrayed on the out in the open to the world.
Chinatown.
Yeah, I would say it actually is a pretty good. The movie's a pretty good metaphor for what's actually going on in the world right this second. The more I think about it.
China, 63. Happened on a Friday in 63. Sorry, Chinese is 63, beg your pardon. China's 35, 35th president. Reverse infiltration, 2/39, 1963. Or infiltration reverse. Chinatown. Town is first. Money. China money. Huh. Chinatown. Very good. Chinatown comes to 107.
Oh, well. Well, there's a good one.
That is a good one. That is a good one. Chinatown. So this is what the promenade we're going down now?
Well, this is just the waterfront here. It's a beautiful spot. One of the prettiest waterfronts of its type, out there. And of course, the city has one of the Eye of Osiris Ferris wheels in it. And if you look at the architecture, like most major cities around the world, you'll see certain buildings that have occult symbology in them. And a very common theme anywhere in the world you go, that the city leaders like to do that. The business people are doing it because there is an occult undercurrent present in so much of it, what occurs in the world. But it is a beautiful city, and this is really a spectacular time of the year. I just missed the orange blossom or the cherry blossom festivals, and but now we're into what's called Golden Week or Gold Week, and that's when the schools are out for 10 days and families take their kids and go places and do fun stuff, and it's just a fun time of the year. The weather's just perfect before it gets more sultry as you get further into the summer and hot. So, and as you know from the last couple of days, I had a little bit of
a
cough there, so I apologize for everybody, but it's just the nature of the beast. Sometimes you go change from one place to another. It takes a little bit. I actually put this to some of the food. Your system has to kind of readjust. The food in different parts of the world is a little different, and they tend I've been eating in Chinatown more than I've been eating some of the raw stuff that I actually like, and so I think it is taking my throat a little bit to adjust to that, but nothing major. But I noticed it over the last couple of days. Like, so anyway,
this location then, is it next to Tokyo? Is it quite far? Is it part of the region?
Well, it's Tokyo is monorail right away. They have high-speed trains. I think it's an hour to get up there. In fact, I'll be going up to Tokyo shortly here while I'm here, and you have here as you do in so many parts of the world, because of compactness, it works. You have great subway systems and rail systems to connect different parts of the country, and cars are a very expensive item to have here. And so not that much of the population has the cars. You see a lot of them, but it's not as big as it is in, say, the West in the US or something like that. But it doesn't work as well. These people want the 15-minute cities and things like that. Most places in the US, it's a big country, and it just doesn't work. You're not going to run your large farm operation out in the middle of Timbuktu with a couple of electric trucks. And, you can run around town, but you can't go very far with these very expensive monorail or train systems, much more efficient with the buses and like that. But a number of big cities have put in these huge, very, very, very expensive monorail systems, and it's just flabbergasting the money that they've dedicated to them, and they really don't work. In the West, it's kind of a racket or a scam, really. But here, it does make sense. It makes sense, for example, in Washington, D.C., where they have a great underground rail system, and worked for the people working in that area, but doesn't work well for, you just get 10 or 15 miles out of town, and the whole idea breaks down. You got to go back to buses, so or private cars. So,
Are there more Japanese cars outside of Japan than inside then, would you say?
Yeah, probably the best of the manufacturers, my personal opinion, is Toyota.
Yeah.
And Nissan a strong second. And then, a number of the other manufacturers. I do remember I had one of my friends actually got a Honda dealership in about 1971 for Honda cars. And his dad was a airline pilot and encouraged him. And in fact, I think he worked for Northwest, and encouraged him to, he had gone to Japan, seen something, and of course, Honda motorcycles were a big deal in that era, but pulled together some college money, and instead of spending on college, spent it buying a Honda car dealership. And it was at the time pretty reasonable cheap. I think he used his dad's credit to help lock it in. And I remember that he had a Honda car, and it just seemed so out of place. It was so small, a little silver Honda car. And but he bragged on the miles it got. And I remember being how impressed I was at how well built the car was. It really had great, it was a tight little car, had good pep to it. And, he drove it for a long time, all the way through college. And the only thing that he ever had a problem with, twice, it had started operating just horribly. And I was like, oh my gosh, where am I going to find a mechanic that can work on this thing? And, talking with the dealership or the Honda people nationally. And they said, well, we start with the fuel filter because you have such dirty fuel in some of your gas stations there. The fuel tanks at gas stations aren't well maintained for filters. Changed the fuel filter both times. The car worked great. I think he had, by the time he got out of college, like 150,000 miles and thing. Only thing it does is brakes, tires, and fuel filters. So they were really well built. He ended up selling his dealership. They bought him back out. He made a tremendous amount of money on it as they got better and better. And just like the motorcycles, the quality of the Japanese industry is stunning. People laughed after World War II as MacArthur came in and was helping them to rebuild everything in Japan and shift over after this wartime economy. that was in, they made fun of the trinkets that the factories were putting out, toys and things. And it was a joke in America about the Japanese knickknacks that soldiers were bringing back that were there in occupied Japan. But very quickly, you have to understand that they don't have a lot of resources in Japan. They have the ability to grow amazing things. They've got, everything for the most part has to be shipped in. And then they use their labor to turn it into valuable things and send it back. So they got into the electronics, the first transistor radios, marketed inexpensively. I had one when I was little. I'd hide it under the pillow, a 9 volt transistor radio, so I could listen to a talk show late at night. And music and like that into the wee hours, and just got better and better and better. Germany had Zeiss lenses and attack that market also, and make these amazing cameras here. Did for decades, and every Japanese tourist around the world is carrying a Japanese camera. And myself, Canon, I did a lot of work with Canon. Canon's my favorite camera system, and I've had a lot of their stuff all along for decades and decades and decades. And the lenses, the Canon lenses, and systems are just the best in the world, in my opinion. There's some other manufacturers here in Japan that do an amazing job too, but I still prefer the Canon myself. It's like so many things, just like the cars. You get something where you kind of know it. You have a few pieces, lenses and things like that, and you tend to stick with it because it's what you know. So I personally prefer the Canon. That's what I've had, and that's what I like.
Canon. Do you know much about the company Bushnell that does the sight finders, the range finders, the golf lasers?
I know of them, and I've got Bushnell lenses on a couple of my rifles.
Okay.
And so I'm familiar with it at that level. I'm not intricately familiar with it in any way, but again, in hunting rifles, like in the cameras, they go through so many temperature changes, and so beyond the optics, it's the ability to get a good seal, and then what coatings do they have on the lenses to handle the light and refraction, so that you don't get glare or blooms looking through the sights at critical moments. And of course, like if you're using stuff for sniper stuff and like that, it's very critical. You end up putting a gauze over the lens so that you can take the glare off and not be seen at a distance like that. There's all sorts of things you have to do, so the quality of the lens becomes even more important. So
I've got some binoculars here, one that came with my place, and I use them to look at the ships and the sea, but I never actually looked at the brand. They're called Telstar. I don't know if you can see. I'm pointing them at the camera now.
Mm-hmm.
There they are.
Telstar. It's a long time too.
Yeah. But they're fun. When you talked about the coated optics, yeah, Telstar.
Yeah, there's so much, in the various lens systems. It's just it's amazing how complex it is. I was at did a red flag back in the mid 70s, and we went one of the places we ended up having to go during that. It's a operation where we simulate Russian aircraft versus American aircraft, and Uh, After that, we found ourselves at a Singer plant, which, you think of Singer sewing machines, but they actually made the um, lens systems for the goggles on the helmets. These very complex uh, fighter pilot helmets that you have to be able to see very clearly through without all sorts of glare and things like that, because you're looking at another aircraft. To see clearly another aircraft, just 1 second is, the moon when you're going into a combat situation. And they make these very advanced helmets to help you be able to monitor at that time um, all of your systems within the aircraft, and then targets, and still be able to see out the lenses at the same time to actually see visually what might be coming at you or going away. And so there's a lot to the lenses. I remember years ago too, getting to go through with one of my friends the Oakley facility down in Southern California for sunglasses, and
Yeah.
again all of the optics. And one of the most amazing things that I remember from that, I had before Oakley bought the company, I had a fold up pair of glasses that I liked in the helicopter, and because I could just stick them in my pocket and they didn't take up a lot of space, they'd fold down to just one little square, and they were Ray-Bans, and I just loved those sunglasses. And I had a strap I could wear them around my neck, a floaty strap on the boat, and they fell off or something. They wouldn't sink, and so they had a mannequin head, and they had little lasers sticking out the eyes of this mannequin, just a foam mannequin like you'd see in any, store or shop, clothing shop. And it would shoot across the room onto a wall with these two little red lasers. And they were, perfectly aligned. They were in a square. And then they put a pair, what they did with me, they said, here, put your glasses on the mannequin. So I put my glasses on the mannequin, and the laser going through the lens would go here and here, and it wasn't straight to the wall. And so the owner of Oakley says, well, you see what the issue is? Your eyes are having to strain to look forward because the glass is canted a different way in a different way. And so with these glasses that fold up, it's even more accentuated. So it might be convenient, but you're causing eye strain. Do you, if you wear them for a long time, do you get a little bit of a headache? Do you feel a little bit strained after you've done it for a bit of a drive or something like that? Well, the reality is I'm not a big sunglasses person. I'll wear them, for a little bit at key moments, but it's not like I would golf with them or something like that. I don't really use sunglasses that much. Just when the glare might be extra brighter, I want to cut the sun, some particular situation. And but then they took a pair of the Oakleys and put it over the mannequin's head, and the lasers stayed right where they were going to. They were very well aligned, and the lenses didn't deflect that beam in weird angles. And several other people did it with other brands of glasses, and none of them shot straight. The only ones that did that, and we pulled a number of them off the shelves and tried them, and every one of the Oakleys shot that beam straight through. And of course, one of the things is Oakley. The other thing that was wild about those Oakleys, I had a guy in Iraq that a rifle round hit right in front of him. He was on the ground in sand dirt area, and this rifle round hit in front of him, 20 feet or so out in front of him. And but it was a heavy round. It wasn't something light. It wasn't just a pistol bullet or something. and it sprayed rock at him. In fact, that was the context why I was there at Oakley at the time. And the all of the rock debris blasted straight up and hit his face. And so when you looked at him, the glasses weren't even chipped or cracked. It was phenomenal. And his face, when he took his glasses off, you could see all the pockmarks all around his face, deep. I mean, he really got hit. It showed those marks. I think, a year later, you could still see little places where some of those marks were. But the glasses weren't even chipped that he had on Oakley glasses, and protected him. Nothing got through, and they were was very effective protection from. They talk about protecting you from 1,000,000 degrees centigrade from the sun or something with solar radiation. They protected him from actual particle beam weapons.
Wow. Oakley's, yeah.
But again, lenses and optics and things like that, yeah, big deal. But here in Japan, the people they take stuff and they build it into something, and the process of doing that. So that's why, like Toyota, is world renowned. Companies hire people from Toyota to come to their factories, their operations, and train them in the Toyota way, which I'll use an example. Ford had to kind of reinvent themselves back in the late 80s, early 90s, because of the Asian market with cars was becoming extremely high quality. The fit and finish, the trim, the engineering, the precision, Japan specifically, with the cars and the motorcycles, were just raising the bar so high. And, beyond Ford, even Chevrolet. I'm just thinking of a particular example. I had a very rare turbocharged Buick, it was a Buick. It was a turbocharged Chevrolet. Not the Nova, not the Chevelle, one of the Chevrolets, the little Chevrolets. But they had, for just a few of the cars, put in a Buick engine with a turbocharger. It actually was the highest horsepower output, I believe, other than the Corvette in the entire GM system. And it was, oh gosh, I can't remember which model of the Chevrolet, just one of the inexpensive ones. But anyway, I remember looking at the car, and it was 81 or 82. I had a red one. And we were going to send it out to have some paint work done to it. The car was, perfect condition, never been in an accident or anything. It was just that red, it's a high pigment color. It wasn't as nice as it needed to look as far as I was concerned, and it was a low mile car. So I was going to have them put just a light coat for color only, not when the paint was good originally. We just scuff it down to, to take the top off. The paint was a little too thin, so there was a few places where you could kind of see almost through to the primer kind of level. And I says, no, let's just put a light coat on it, and just for color, not so much for coverage, not deep. And so as we were going through it, I was with the painter, and he was fussing. He said, the problem with this car is, look at all these gaps around the doors, around the hood. Everywhere you looked at it, the trim, the fit and finish was not good. In the doors, which this was the car that was in perfect condition, never been wrecked or anything like that. And you look at the alignment on the doors and the fender, And at the top of the fender, it might have a half an inch, and at the bottom, it'd have a quarter of an inch. It just looked sloppy. It wasn't well executed. And the car had a lot of squeaks to it that were just, not well thought through. And, that was 81, 82 in that era there. And so I ended up not keeping the car for long. I had it for a year or two just because it was a fun, interesting piece. It was still gutless, even though it had a turbocharger on it. We were going to do something to spruce it up like the Grand Nationals, and eventually just decided, nah, I've got other stuff in there. And it wasn't a convertible, and it wasn't a T-top. And so I just said, nah, I'll get something else. But I mentioned that 81, 82. Japan was sending cars to America, and people were shifting and buying Japanese cars. They got better mileage. They had better fit and trim and polish. One of the car manufacturers at that time did an ad where they took their car and they put a ball bearing. They had it on a kind of a swivel type of a thing, and a robot was a computer program was set to run this thing, and they ran this ball bearing down every seam on the top side of the car, the hood and the trunk lid and other stuff, and the ball bearing didn't sink or come up or down. It stayed very evenly, like a 1-inch ball bearing, and it showed that the gap all through the gaps on the car and the hood and all that was very consistent and even. The precision was over the top. And what was just amazing with that was that from a Western side, from a Western automotive manufacturer side, they couldn't duplicate that at that time. And Ford began to work towards how are we going to tighten up our quality control. And we were out, 89. I mentioned, we did the one lap around America. One of the stops that we did was at the Ford factory. And they were just at the time getting ready to, bring out the new Probe car. And we were getting to see behind the scenes all the development, the parts being made, etc., for the Probe. And they were going to work with Japan on bringing this front-wheel drive car out. But at the time, they were going to make it the Mustang. They were going to replace the rear-wheel drive Mustang with the Probe. And I probably was the most vocal. A bunch of us just raised a huge stink. Ford didn't make a anniversary edition Mustang. They weren't planning on it. And we were like, what are you guys thinking? And Peterson was over there running Ford at the time, and made a huge stink. And they ended up later deciding to make that front wheel drive car instead of the Mustang. They made it the Probe, and kept the Mustang line. And guys did a reinvention of the Mustang line. I came back, 2 years later, and they had come up with a way to keep do a Mustang rear wheel drive platform, and did a beautiful job of it too at that time. But the thing about Japan, brother sharpens brother as iron sharpens iron. Japan raised the bar on the quality of the builds, the way that they did it, the process of building a car and working through all of the issues. Ford took up the challenge, and one of the things that they did over at Ford, and I remember the story at the time we were talking about it, was that, and I think this was in 92, I think, when I was back out of the factory. One of the engineers on the assembly line was telling us that one of the biggest things they did, and it was something that came from Toyota that got them to decide to do it. One of the biggest things that they did was at every station along the assembly line, they put a big red button. Every person on the assembly line at these various stages of assembling a car which, by the way, Ford is the one that created the assembly line process. They're the ones that took making cars of into a very precise process. So, for example, one of the things that Henry Ford did, just kind of give you this picture in your mind, when he ordered engines and transmissions from a particular manufacturer, he at the very beginning of the whole Ford operation, he laid out extremely precise specifics about what the crate for the engine had to look like, how it had to be made, exactly what type of wood, a particular type of oak it had to be made from. And so when the company took the bid and started building engines for Ford and sending them over, even though it was in the original contract, they just made a crate that worked for the engine that was simple and easy and cheap, and sent the engines over to Ford. Henry Ford rejected the engines and wouldn't pay the bill because they hadn't been shipped in the right crate. So the company, they had an exchange, and they went ahead and made the crates according to specification, the way Ford wanted them, and sent the engines back. All they did is change the crate that the engines were shipped in. Well, who the hell cares what the crate looks like? You're going to throw it away. It's just, it's just the box the engine came in. But Ford, being precise and detailed and having thought this through, had specified a particular type of oak that was very hard as nails, that was used in shipbuilding. And even though it was more expensive for the manufacturer to make the engine crates to those specifications, and they had to be precise, what Ford did is they pulled the engine out of the crate, and then the crate frame became the frame of his early Model T cars. So they used that wood frame as the basis for the rest of the body frame in the car. There was no wastage. They didn't have to figure out who's going to pick up the wood for garbage or where it's going to be burned. That was the core of the a foundational part of the car in those early Ford cars. And there's a certain genius to that, and you never had more frames. The frame came, shipping, handling, everything else came with the engine. You pull the frame off the thing, put it down for the foundation of the car, and the engine went into the forward portions of the metal, and that was used. That was the manufacturing genius to lower the cost, wanting a car that even his own employees on the assembly line could afford, as opposed to these custom built cars that every one of them is a little different. And a friend of mine, Earl Muntz, built his own car, the Muntz Jet, 100 a year, 99 a year for 4 years. And the guys that have the jets around the world, every one of them is different because they were all hand built. And so screws were different, points of attachment were different, because they were kind of modifying and changing as they went. And, arguably the first American sports car, 51 to 54, beautiful, fun, cool car. They're kind of different. But then you move forward in time, based on a Kaiser platform, different engines, Chevrolet or a GM Cadillac engines for the first 53 cars, and then switched to Lincoln's hot rod Lincoln motors. And there was a guy still racing them in the mid 70s there in Southern California, Muntz Jet, from the 50s, and being very competitive with that Lincoln motor. But then everybody's got a dog here in Yokohama. You don't need a horse to pull your wheelchair along. He's got the dog doing it there. But so what Ford did, looking at their assembly line process, trying to tighten it up to compete with Japan literally eating Detroit's lunch with their World War II and early 50s manufacturing systems into the mid 60s that were by that time becoming very long in the tooth, and they hadn't reinvested in modernizing Japan, having a clean slate to build the best that they could build at the time, and just, eating Detroit's lunch, very efficient, fuel efficient, um, uh, raising safety standards every year. Or, the cars were very lightweight, worked in a low speed environment like you have in Asia, where the cars aren't really driving at these highway speeds like we have in America and in Europe. 70, 80 miles an hour, or 60 even, much lower energy crashes and things like that. But Japan was raising the bar. So one of the things that they learned, Ford used the Toyota method and allowed all of their personnel to, come in and add their input, what's going on. And one of the things that was a common complaint is the strategy was, as a car came down the assembly line, if you didn't finish whatever you had to do on the car, you had to get to the next car. You couldn't, there was no way to stop anything. There was no way to, adjust or whatever. And even though it's a very refined process, some cars are getting, uh, radios, and some cars aren't. Some cars are getting air conditioning and other cars aren't. As the build sheet comes down with the car, you have your stuff right there at the site to build that specific car according to that specific order. Power windows or not. And each stage along the assembly line, you're having to do all sorts of different things: automatic, manual, etc. And this stuff is sitting there ready to go. If for some reason you didn't get a bolt all the way tight or something in the right position, it just went out that way. And the attitude was that they would deal with it in post-assembly, or if it came up at the dealer level, the dealer would deal with it, and they would just give the dealer the cost because it was too expensive to fix the problem there in the assembly line. And so cars went out with problems. And I'm thinking of a football player who worked on one of the assembly lines, and he made a joke out of the fact that he was on a GM line, that every once in a while they do something. They were getting ready to leave, and they were pissed off at management over something, and so they hung a bolt and a nut on a fishing line in a bunch of cars that was dangling inside the door. And this heavy nut, would just be hanging there. You wouldn't hear it around like that. You go over a bump and it'd bang around inside the door. And it was in a place you couldn't hardly see it. And the idea was that whoever bought the car, the dealer or, repair person would go crazy trying to figure out what that noise was that you'd hear every once in a while, but it was loose, but you couldn't find what was loose. Well, hanging on a fishing line inside the door, this and that. And very malicious for whoever was buying the car, but they thought it was a pretty good joke. And, if you could deal with it later, it'd be fine. But kind of shenanigans that go on assembly lines. And by the way, I had another friend who I knew when I was a kid, and he worked on the Buick line. And the first day on the job, some of the old guys, that was a stacked situation, multi-floor. And so to take him to his job position, the first thing they brought him over and says, "Hey, would you check this? Look in the trunk here, because you're a little guy," and he was like 18. We're trying to find some particular issue, and I think this was pre-World War II, if I recall correctly, because he went to the war afterwards. And so the guys said, "Yeah, there's something or other. Look up here," because they were saying there was like a loose nut or bolt or something like that. And so he crawls up in there to go do it. They slam the lid of the trunk closed. It's that big. And then they raced him through the factory, up and down the various levels to the location where he's going to work. And he's bouncing around in the trunk of the car. as they race the thing through the building, and they get him out. And that was his initiation to work at the Buick plant on the assembly line. And everybody had a big laugh. He didn't think it was very funny because he got banged up pretty good. But that was the way they initiated guys. Now you can work on the assembly line. And, you know, but coming back to the Ford thing, cars were going out with lousy fit and trim and polish and look and everything. Chevrolet had the same problem. Ford took the Toyota idea and the conversations with all of their employees trying to work through how we're going to build a better car. And rather than let it go to the dealer to be dealt with at the dealer, or have the customer have to deal with an issue with the car and all the frustration back and forth to the dealership and everything else, Ford came up with this big red button at the various workstations along the assembly line. And they said, if you can't get your position taken care of in time to keep that car from going out with a loose bolt or something that's hung up, when you're putting a bolt on, sometimes it gets cross-threaded or something and you're racing. It's like a NASCAR stop. And you just race to get everything done. You've only got so many minutes. And the stations are set up with a certain length to allow you to get everything done. You got to be trained. You got to, really know your position. And everybody in the assembly line has to work together to make it happen. And so, what they did was they put this big red button there where anybody on the assembly line could stop the assembly line right where it was at. And the whole assembly line from one end to the other would stop. And that person could finish his job and then restart the assembly line. Now, you have to put it in your mind, first off, prior to this, if the assembly line was 15 seconds slow for some reason, the manager on that shift on the assembly line was down there barking and looking and trying to figure out exactly what's the problem here and get it, up to speed. If you were a half a minute slow on the assembly line, if the assembly line was moving slower by a half a minute, crap, you had a VP down there screaming bloody murder. What in the world's going on? Okay. But you get up there in a minute and one of the Ford family is down there trying to figure out what's going wrong. What's the screw up here? Because those cars are on a schedule and it's very, very complex. There's a lot going on there. And so it has to work very precisely and everybody has to do their job. Well, the idea of stopping the assembly line was just, it was just almost unheard of. But if you're going to do quality is job one, became their motto, and we're going to make it quality, period. That's the most important thing. If we have to do a slower assembly process to get the gaps right on the cars and fenders to make sure that the door closes precisely every time, that there's, the grommets around the wiring are in place so there's not water leaking through, that every rubber seal is perfectly positioned, whatever it is, so that you get nice tight air feel and all that, then that's what we got to do. Things that Japan was already doing. They had to up the game. And so they put it in. And I remember when I was there, and I was saying, well, how many times has it had to be stopped? I mean, is this a common thing? Do you have it slow down a number of times during the course of the day? And the VP I was talking to says, nope. We had a few stops early on. We figured out what the problems were, and we got it sorted out. And to be honest with you, what the deal is, nobody working, the employees along the assembly line, if somebody stopped it in their meetings, everybody there would then have a meeting. Okay, we had to stop in the assembly line, pre or post shift, whenever they did it, probably a weekly meeting or something. And here's what happened. Here's why it happened. The employee would explain what the issue was. Somebody would come up with a better tool so that they could work faster. They would maybe do some pre-assembly line changes to the way the part was there to be put in the car. They identified the places that were the biggest problems. The employees gave the input. And then once the employee got a chance to be heard, the issue was addressed, and the employees had great suggestions, all of a sudden that would eliminate. And what happened was it became a point of honor to address issues before you might be the guy that had to push the big red button. And people, it was a point of honor to get your work done, so you weren't the guy that had to push the big red button. What's your problem? And guys tended to take ownership because they couldn't blame it on some other guy at the other end of the assembly line. If you're the guy that pushed the big red button, you better have a good excuse, a sound reason why that had to be pushed. And everybody else came in and provided suggestions. The assembly line ran a lot smoother because people were being listened to. The problems were being addressed. And then if you had a guy that was, struggling in his position, everybody came together to try and figure out how are we going to make it so that that's not a problem in this location. One of the women that was present in the meeting I was in commented that some of the parts were just too heavy for her in that position, and they wanted to move her to a different position. She came up with a method that made it so she didn't have to deal with the weight the same way, and it was pretty simple. And she had this idea because she worked on the line. She came up with an idea. They got more input instead of engineers in an office 10 blocks away. It was the people on the assembly line having to actually do the work, and they ended up having more input on how the cars were built. If you look at how the Mustang project, when they raced to put when they decided not to do the probe and to go ahead and use the rear wheel drive platform again on the new model, they brought in a bunch of the people from the assembly line and from engineering that just loved the Mustang, and in a race came up and designed a whole new platform, as much off the shelf as they could with already available parts, and saved the Mustang. And it's an amazing story the way that they did it, and it was mostly because of Ford employees competing against the idea that their jobs and were going to be shipped out for a platform that was going to be built outside the United States, and the probe, and then brought back in and add a few more things to meet the American assembly built stuff to say it was a North American built car. And they saved their jobs by coming up with this idea that, by the way, is also what the American people wanted. They sold a lot of Mustangs. People didn't want front wheel drive. They're more complex. They're not as they're good getting out of the snow from a dead stop, but once you get going, there's all sorts of steering and traction, wet road safety issues that go in there too. It's expensive and complex to overcome some of those issues, let alone performance like that. So, it suited a North American buyer, and Ford, I think, led the way in that. In fact, when Obama did the thing where he, gave the bailout to the various car manufacturers, GM took piles of money, Ford didn't take any. Dodge took piles of money, Ford didn't take any. They didn't need the money, and they got penalized because they didn't need that government handout. That's part of the reason why I love Ford. In that era, they did the right thing, and were making a quality product, got penalized for doing the job right, as opposed to have to get bailed out on their prehistoric factories. They had upgraded, taken the challenge from Japan, and improved the game. So anyway, that's probably a lot of different directions, but fun to kind of, throw out some of that stuff for people to cogitate on. And of course, what's going to happen in America now? You know, the whole world got shut down during the pandemic, and there's a lot at stake. We're coming into other crises. Our closest trade partner in the world really is Japan from the United States side. Our closest economic partner, the dollar and the yen, are very, very tightly associated. And yet right now, the dollar is stronger against the yen than it's ever been, all the way back to about 1990. And it has to do with a number of issues, including the way we use the Japanese economy and the yen in the Cold War to take down the Soviet Union. And some of those issues were never properly addressed in shutting that down. There was a plan to do it, and after Reagan, during the Bush administration, that wasn't followed. And it's created a financial crisis that continues even today with those funds that I would consider stolen, and how they've been used out across the world ever since, hijacked. And Japan, many people around Trump have said that the place he felt the safest was on his visits to Japan. They're that close of an ally in the intelligence world. That goes back to the MacArthur operations and rebuilding Japan and allowing them to rebuild their intelligence agencies out into the Asian countries, including China, that we depend on. And so Japan is this extremely close, important ally. I would consider personally our closest one in the world. And the crises that America is coming into right now, and the world, over the next months and years, Japan is going to be so crucial to every aspect of what's ahead, including the rebuilding, reorienting of the American market. Japan needs raw resources that they refine and build and turn into amazing things. And they need stuff that America has. America needs stuff that they have. The world needs stuff that is uniquely and amazingly built here in Japan. The people take a lot of, personal, professional pride in the quality products that they build. And you see it in the way that they conduct themselves, the way they live. The streets are kept clean. The roads are kept flat and straight. The potholes are dealt with immediately. The cars on the road have to be maintained at a certain level, even for appearance. You can't drive around a sloppy, crappy car. You'll get a ticket. So they have certain agreed upon community standards because they want to run their society in a certain way, and it works for them. We can learn a lot back in the U.S. The other side of the coin, the flip side to all of that, when I talk about all these beautiful things with Japan and their factories like that, in the 50s and 60s, as they were building their way back out from the war years, Japanese businesses and businessmen loved the American way. They saw the way that Detroit was built and operated during and after the war, and the esprit de corps that American businessmen had, and they worked very hard to emulate that, and they took it to new levels. They didn't just copy it; they added to it and built something that's uniquely Japanese and a brand of extremely high quality. They were very competitive in the platforms that they built. Gosh, you come to Japan. I remember people kidding about the Japanese baseball in the 60s and 70s. You come to Japan and look at baseball. My gosh, they do baseball at levels that exceed even America in many ways. We've had a number of Japanese players come over and play on American teams. They are great competitors. That's not a negative. That's a very positive thing. I love competing with guys that really raise the bar, earn your respect, and make you better. It's a fun challenge. The things that are out ahead for America, things we have to do, moving our population out into the edge of space, a world, think of the years that have gone by since the end of World War II and the way the world and society and business and national relations have changed, and just add another 80 years to that. What will our world look like, and who's going to put the imprint? What's that imprint going to look like in America? What's that going to be? I'll keep this. Thank you. What's that world going to look like? And by the way, you'd think that's a city employee or something that's cleaning up. That's just an average citizen on his walk in the morning, picking up garbage along the walk to make sure that the city stays looking nice and beautiful and everything else. Can you imagine that? That's just an average guy.
Yeah.
That's the esprit de corps. He's out doing his morning exercise. He has some ski poles for balance. I talked to him the other day, and no, that's what he does for his morning walk. Can you imagine? Think about that.
Yeah.
So,
well, I got a question for you. And I like that. I've not been to Japan in this life, at least, and I would like to go. And it's amazing how you've highlighted their respect, the way that they hold themselves accountable to a higher standard. Just some couple of numbers on when you were given the Mustang and the big red button story. So a big red button comes to 138, Donald Trump, and Ford Mustang comes to 138. Have you seen the film? We talked about Oppenheimer briefly. Christopher Nolan made that. Did you see his film Tenet that came out in 2020, the one before Oppenheimer?
Oh, yeah.
So the part in there where they reverse the flow of time, they go through this device called Turnstile. Turnstile is 138 as well, Donald Trump. And Christopher Nolan, the director, writer, producer, has said that he did stuff with Kip Thorne, the theoretical physicist, on Interstellar, and he's also done it on Tenet with him. He's talked about, most of the laws of physics are not kind of directional; they kind of work forwards and backwards. And he said, but entropy doesn't come into that category, so that's why it tends to push in the direction that we're in. The things that it shows in Tenet are fascinating. From your understanding of physics and other physics, could inversion, reversing the flow of time, objects and people, is that possible from your understanding of what Nolan depicted in that film in Tenet?
Well, let me come at it slightly differently than probably any of those guys did. From a scriptural standpoint, in a number of different religions, by the way, not just the Bible, but there is these themes where you have time travelers that have walked across time like we walk across the street to deliver messages. And of course, the one that I've mentioned a number of times is the angel sent back across time from the end of this era, from the cataclysms that are yet ahead. Daniel prayed in Babylon when he was there in captivity. He'd been castrated, so he'd never have children of his own at a young age. And he's there serving under the king of Babylon, but he's praying and fasting and asking what will be of the Jewish people, the children of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, where they had this promise to Abraham that his seed would be as the sand of the seashore for number, and as the stars in heaven for number. And yet here the nation has been overrun, dismantled, destroyed, and the people taken captive, and the ones that weren't taken captive to Babylon have been scattered all over the world. And so how can God's promise to Abraham be fulfilled? And so he's praying to God, how are you going to do this? What's going to happen to your people? How can you let this happen? And so God sends him an answer. He sends an angel right from the end time period, what we see in the New Testament as Revelations. And this angel goes back across time to tell Daniel what has happened, what has happened. He was a real-time observer, present, involved in all of the military activity to save the people of Israel, the children of Abraham, in this end-time cataclysm, and saw all of those events, including the return of Christ. And then God dispatches him back across time, all the way to Babylon. And one of the things that happens on the way, he has to battle with this dark angel over Persia, which is modern day Iran. And it's a huge battle of this dark angel versus this angel of God. And at a certain point, another angel comes in to relieve him in this epic battle. And he continues on his way while the other angel does this fight with the angel over Persia, which is a very powerful angel. The angel continues back to Daniel and then gives him this very complex message about what's going to happen, what the end times look like. After he gives it all to him, he tells him to seal up the book, not to put it out to the public, not to release it to everybody. It's to be sealed up until that time for those people, for us, literally now. And it wasn't a message that needed to distract or be there for everybody else. It was going to be far enough in the future that it wasn't relevant for them. It would be a distraction for them. So with that as the basis, from a divine perspective, agents of God, the divine, are able to transit time. Now, were the dark angels, were the satanic angels allowed to transit time also? There's no indication of that. They are captives of the passage of time and don't have the capability, the technology, they're somehow restricted, not able to walk across time. In other words, the dark angel over Persia, which didn't technically exist yet, it was 50 years in Daniel's future, or more. When that encounter happened, did the dark angel travel with the messenger from God back to Daniel? No. And the other angel stayed in that fight. When he went back forward, then he assisted the other angel and the fight was done. And, I've mentioned before, that was almost certainly during the calamitous period of Esther and the attempt to destroy all the Jews there in Daniel's future. And by the way, Daniel, part of the message that he probably received at that time was, of course, of his own end, which came when he was taken from Babylon into Persia, when the Medes and the Persians overthrew Babylon. A little fun guy here. Uh, so very nice, right?
Hmm.
And so the super short story is time travel is obviously possible. I would say that the information that Daniel received was very accurate. When you read through it, you go, "Gosh, I mean that really describes this moment, uh, and in so many ways." And uh, with that as a premise, then can we engineer to be able to do time travel? Well, at the Tower of Babel, uh, that's where God confused all of the languages of the various people that were present. They were involved in an engineering project. They were had come together in this post-flood era to build a tower into the heavens and essentially get off the earth to get above where the floodwaters could get them out in the future, if you want to think of it in those type of terms. And they came together to work together on this engineering project. Now think of the world the way it is right now today in arguably, let's say, 200 to 300 years. We've gone from sticks and stones and horse-driven carts uh, to steam engines and gas engines and jet engines and ion-powered engines. We have, split the atom. We're looking at various types of plasma physics and um, uh, sciences that are just hard to even discuss out of certain zones. The capabilities are just almost unimaginable. That's just 200 to 300 years. You're in an era when people live much longer lifetimes, by the way, back at the time of Tower of Babel. And so God, it said, looked upon their work, looked upon what they endeavored and had set their minds to do. Really, a space program is portrayed to us as just a physical tower, but they were actually involved in something much more complex, the engineering to leave this prison planet, if you will. And it's just portrayed in simple words for people to understand, but it's more complex. And God said that there was nothing which they would set their minds to do, which would not be possible to them. That anything that they could conceive, they could do it. And that's the history of man. Look at all the stuff I was just describing to you with factories and technologies and coming together, the assembly line, the precision, the thousands of different people and ideas sharing that information and perfecting processes to do incredible, amazing things. And we're still only getting started. Um, uh, give another 80 years to this and imagine, without total destruction of war, where we might go from here with various advancements at every level, from the micro and sub-micro to projects of planetary scale, uh, uh, things that are just I have a pretty good sci-fi collection, and the imaginations of these people in these sci-fi books and the worlds that they envision, the way things work, it's just stunning to me. It's some of the funnest time I have reading good sci-fi novels. But God said that there was nothing which would be impossible to them. Nothing. If you could imagine it, it could be done. So with that in mind, and the fact that it can be done, at some point, would it be possible to do time travel? I think Yeah, probably is. Did what the angel gave to David, did it affect the future? Did it change the future? How did it happen? Why did God even put it in Daniel's heart to want to know the future? And did God put it in Daniel's heart to want to know the future so that things that Daniel would record then would affect the future? Did God have to have a time traveler as part of his equation in order to get the future outcome that he wanted, to place enough hope into the hearts of people in the intervening period to see that he was there both in the past and in the future, and that they had reasons for hope? In fact, I will tell you that that's part of even the Q operation, to give people reasons for hope with a sort of cued in time travel, anticipating the future, telling you what the future is before you get there, giving you choke points for that progression, so that you know that you know where we're going with this. And by the way, future proves past. Part of what's misunderstood within that whole thing is, say, military and control. Well, was would you say that the military is in control every aspect along the way? Which military, good guys or bad guys, is one of the things that people get hung up on very heavily. And you have to understand, know that at a certain point, the situation changes and it leaves the political realm. And it always had to be that the way that you have to get this under control, because it's so out of whack, is there will be a time when the military has to control every operation. Well, if you look back from there, if there's a point that's being engineered, like a focal point, when you take a magnifying glass and you have the sun coming through, or a light, and then you move the magnifying glass closer, further away from a surface, depending on the curvature of the lens, you bring it to a focal point, and where it's crisp and sharp and pointed. Um, uh, there's all of this energy that's taking place within the various operations in the world that are being brought to a focal point of military and control. Well, if they had the ability to bring it there, were they in control the whole time, even though it wasn't visible? Would you say that uh, that it was a military operation, even though, say, the Pentagon and other militaries around the world were not in agreement and working together? And yet, at some future point, with all the actions engineered the way they do, suddenly they are all working together. Well, was that prophetic? Was that that they were always completely under control, or was the game coming to a head in a certain way over time, where the eventual outcome had been preordained and planned and anticipated, that if you do all these various other things, where you end up with is military and control? And if you read the Q posts in that type of a light, you come to understand that things are being put in place towards a focal point, and you have to read them in that way. You're looking at checkpoints in history that are anticipated based on things that are being done along the way. So, uh, in a sense, with the aid of computers, AI, augmented intelligence, um, a game plan has been engineered, and the computers are actually time machines. They're taking all the minutia of things that are known and can be known or should be known. They're blending them all together and saying, well, if you do this or you change that or you do whatever, you end up with this outcome. And they're anticipating, predicting, engineering the future outcome of events. So you have people wanting certain outcomes, and then working through the logistics. How do you make that happen? How do you stop this other thing from happening? Uh, you know, what's the best way to get there, of using these artificial intelligences to play out hundreds, thousands, billions of scenarios in minutes without actually going through them physically, by working out the mechanics of, well, what happens if we change this? What happens if we have this happen? What's the more likely outcome of this or this or this occur? And that's what you really had with the Q operation. And that's what you're seeing play out in the world. And even with Trump as the rabbit, that's part of this thing to expose the mechanisms in this James Bond film we're living, of control of the world, anticipating out in the future. Wisdom is the ability to foresee the future consequences of present action. And so we augment our human wisdom with the mechanical, functional insights that we can gain by using a machine to play out various scenarios and most likely outcomes, to come up with the best game plan and the key choke points and the most critical things that have to happen in a certain way or sequence and time in order to get the right outcome. And that's what's been engineered out. So in our era, computers are being used as a form of a time machine, to see what the future might look like and to engineer different outcomes of in that way. It's probably not the time machine answer that your people would like to hear, with Tenet and the movie scripts, things like that. But Tenet's possible, not right now, but it is possible. And God seems to affirm that with the Tower of Babel. Nothing will be impossible to you. Are we being visited today by time travelers? Well, if you can travel in time, the angel walked across time about 3,000 years to get back to Daniel, like we walked across the street. How long did it take him? There was a period of time that elapsed. Somehow there's a thing, why couldn't the angel leave and be at Daniel instantaneously? There was this several week period from the time he left. Then we had this battle with the angel over Persia, this dark angel. And then he finally got to Daniel. Several weeks elapsed from the time that Daniel began the prayer to the time the answer came. Why couldn't the angel have just gone back to the instant that Daniel began to pray, not weeks later? He's walking across time. What's the delay? There's all sorts of little things that are fun mental exercises when you think that through.
What is the delay? Yeah, what is the delay?
Well, I think it has to do with the Daniel part. Of the anticipatory part was that his heart, his mind needed those intervening weeks to receive the message, that he conceived the message, that it came into his mind, that God put it on his heart to ask such a question. Wasn't all of it. He then needed that intervening period to clear everything else out of his mind that were distractions, that were from that current day, to focus on God himself. And then when Daniel was ready to hear the message, when he had been fasting and praying and he was ready to receive the message, that's when he got it. And that's actually a common theme throughout human history. We ask things of God and we want an answer, but it's not God that's the problem, it's us. We have so much that clutters and confuses and distracts, and we aren't actually ready to hear what he has to say. It's one thing to want to hear an answer. It's a message. It's another thing to be ready. Even this intervening period with the stolen election from 2020, it's taken, and other issues and stuff in 2022. it's taken this intervening period. A lot of people thought, Trump should have signed the Insurrection Act and done all sorts of things, but the American people weren't ready to hear what they needed to hear. People around the world weren't ready to hear about 71 countries. So that's what the guys that engineered this deal that have given their statements and given the evidence behind the scenes, and they're getting ready to be brought out right now, are saying that they helped engineer the theft of 71 different elections around the world over the last decade. And they're giving statements. They're pulling out data. We've got amazing stuff that will be released over the next many, many months. And there's a sequence to it that has to be kind of followed because, again, the people have to be ready to hear what's occurring here. They're not fully ready, but they're becoming more and more ready by the day to hear how this was done, who it was done by, why they did it, what were their objectives, and then to evaluate the risks to themselves and the world if this is allowed to stay in place. What are the consequences out across the world if this is allowed to stay in place? So, will we see a Trump return? What does that look like? Is the population ready for that or not at this point in time? And just like Daniel, there was an intervening period where his heart and mind had to be prepared to hear difficult truths. We're probably in a similar situation out across the world, not just in America. England, all the Commonwealth countries. How much are you similarly controlled by a faction from within that has hijacked and captured control of your operations? And how do you deal with it? What's the consequences of dealing with it? What's at stake? This is an epic battle. Not everybody's going to make it through. It's going to be son of a. Anyway.
Well, thanks, Mark.
We have to contemplate and think.
Yeah. Well, it was fun to talk and reminisce over cars and learn about Japan and talk about some of the gritty stuff. So thank you. Appreciate it. It was nice. And
think of this boat. There's a time machine right there. Can you imagine when that boat came out, what it was like, what people experienced, what the world looked like the day that it first sailed? Yeah. And the people that occupied those rooms on the boat, the captain, the crew. On the other side of the harbor here, we have a clipper ship with dozens of sails on it, an amazing wind-powered ship that sailed the world. And it was made obsolete by something like that. And that was the most modern thing out there at the time. All the places it's been, all the stuff it's gone through, all the storms, all the drama, it survived, didn't sink, as many of them did, went through a couple of wars probably, and here it sits. And it's a time machine. Oh my gosh, it'd be a blast to have experienced those things. I sailed, by the way, in Hawaii on the Independence and the Constitution, two ships from World War II that were refurbished at a certain point in time, and they sailed the Hawaiian Islands. Those were fun, and all the pictures and like that. And then you think of the modern cruise ships today, and those things look like a Model T.
Yeah,
but it was so fun. I mean, I wouldn't trade those experiences for anything, man. I'm telling you, it's fun to have them in your heart. They're long gone now, but to know what it looked like and what it felt like, and we have great adventures out ahead of us. The world will go through this dark night. We will survive this. there's beautiful things out ahead for America, for England, for our peoples. We have some housekeeping to do, but I, see a bright future. Japan is going through some tough stuff right now. The value of the yen at a super low point. Some of the stuff that we did to defeat the Soviet Union. Japan was crucial in doing that. The Japanese people shouldered up and whether they knew it or not, played a crucial role. They're going to come into some rough times here right now, as is the United States, especially the Western United States, based on the yen situation. But we'll get through all of that, and we'll be sharper, faster, stronger, lither as a result of it. I see beautiful things ahead. So even though there's drama and there's some rough spots, there's beautiful things ahead. And I know we have the skill, we have the technology. It's not that difficult. I can find a shop right where you live in England that's going to give you a great price, do it perfectly, and get that stupid blown head gasket solved on your image. It's going to be a piece of cake.
All right.
We'll cross paths here. We'll look forward to that in the next few months. We'll try to get together. Let's go have some fun and fix that thing and go rocketing around. And I assume yours is right-hand drive, right?
Yes, right-hand drive.
Yeah, geez, scary. All right. Well, that's the one thing I probably can't get you guys to fix. You guys drive on the wrong side of the road, man. Your steering wheel's in the wrong place. I go to get in the car. Shoot, the scariest part, is the pedestrian. I go out, I look left. The cars are coming from the right. Yeah, I have to I have to flip my brain around. It's the left brain, right brain thing. My gosh. I don't know if I can help you with that. That may be the one thing, even in time travel, that can't be fixed, is the left brain, right brain thinking, driving on the wrong side of the road. What are you going to drive your spaceship on the wrong side of the freaking galaxy?